Thriving in the Age of Strategy Disruption. Volume 4. 5 Checkpoints on Your Board's Oversight of Climate Risk. A publication of the DCRO Institute. Effective board oversight of climate risk requires a comprehensive approach that weaves climate considerations into all aspects of corporate governance. The interconnection of enterprise risk management, strategy, and capital allocation must be supported by robust communication, disclosure practices, and the right governance architecture, always with an eye on opportunity. But the entirety of the challenge can be overwhelming, making it difficult even to get started. Keeping track of expectations may seem even more challenging if you are already including climate risk in your governance program. Our 5-checkpoint approach begins with categorizing climate risks into distinct types and then focuses on the board's structure, process, and engagement. We next move to incorporating climate risk into the overall enterprise risk management and capital allocation process, building climate resiliency, and ultimately welcoming opportunities that arise from the governance process. This approach increases the likelihood that climate risk is mitigated, and the strategies you adopt enhance overall corporate value. Use these 5 checkpoints as incentives and guidance to begin your journey, or as touchpoints for evaluating whether you are learning to embrace climate risk effectively.
Do we understand climate challenges as 3 types of risk? Boards face immense challenges on multiple strategic fronts. We can better begin to consider climate's potential impact, something daunting on its own, by putting the conversation into a business context, assessing how climate change affects our business model, competitive position, relationships with capital providers, stakeholders, and overall long-term viability. Ultimately, we want to discuss how climate risk impacts our corporate purpose and strategic vision. Management's assumptions about climate impacts should ensure that strategic planning incorporates climate scenarios, and they may already be robust. However, an effective board will continuously challenge these assumptions. Key considerations to challenge include plans for product-service adaptation, supply chain resilience, and innovation opportunities in the low-carbon transition. To do this effectively, it is helpful to categorize climate priorities into 3 types of risk: physical, transition, and liability risks. These categories present distinct but interconnected challenges in climate risk governance and make overall climate risk governance more addressable. Take physical risks first. They manifest in 2 forms: acute risks from increased severity of extreme weather events, floods, hurricanes, wildfires, and chronic risks from long-term shifts in climate patterns, rising sea levels, changing precipitation patterns, sustained higher temperatures. These require boards to assess direct threats to assets, operations, and supply chains, to both unexpected and long-term, enduring changes. Transition risks emerge from the ongoing shift toward a lower carbon economy, encompassing regulatory changes, carbon pricing, emissions regulations, technological disruption, renewable energy adoption, electric vehicles, market shifts, changing consumer preferences, stranded assets, potential political and cultural whipsaw, and reputational impacts, brand value, stakeholder trust, from addressing or not addressing the issues. At least annually, boards should robustly evaluate how these transitions will likely affect business models, long-term capital allocation, and overall competitive positioning. Liability risks are increasingly significant as organizations face potential legal consequences for climate-related actions or inaction. These include litigation risks from failure to disclose climate risks adequately, negligence in adapting to known climate threats, grey rhinos, or contributing to climate change. Boards face particular exposure through directors' and officers' liability if they fail to oversee climate-related risks properly. Incorporating regular reviews of the 5 checkpoints in this article helps to ensure that you are showing reasonable care. The interconnected nature of climate risks requires integrated governance approaches. For example, inadequate management of physical risks may increase liability exposure, while poor transition risk management could lead to both reputational damage and legal challenges. Effective board oversight requires regular assessment of all 3 risk categories and their interactions within the organization's broader risk landscape. which brings us to the second checkpoint in this effective climate risk governance model.
Do we have engagement, compliance, and a fit-for-purpose board? In our publications, we often discuss how the term stakeholders is simply another word for capital providers. When we address their needs and build their trust in us, we reduce the cost of all forms of capital. A robust climate governance program may fall short if there is insufficient focus on the effectiveness of communication with these capital providers, or a failure to invite them to participate in the plan. Communication and disclosure practices require careful board attention. Internal communication should ensure the importance of climate risks is understood throughout the organization. External disclosure must meet evolving regulatory requirements and stakeholder expectations. Boards should oversee the adoption of frameworks like the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD, the UN Principles for Responsible Investments, UNPRI, and the International Sustainability Standards Board Accounting Standards, among others, and ensure disclosures are accurate, verifiable, and decision-useful. Stakeholder advisory boards can give your most important capital providers a valued opportunity to share what matters most to them in your work on climate-related matters. Among those capital providers are regulators. They determine the freedom your organization has to pursue its goals. But regulatory compliance is increasingly complex as climate-related regulations multiply. Boards need avenues to stay informed of evolving requirements across jurisdictions and ensure robust compliance processes. This includes emissions reporting, climate risk disclosure requirements, and sector-specific regulations. Ensuring that the executive team has allocated sufficient human and technological resources to this task is one measure of your care. How ready the board is to address these challenges also reflects the extent of reasonable care being shown. Board committee structure should explicitly address climate oversight, whether through a dedicated sustainability committee or clear allocation to existing committees. Audit, risk, strategy. Responsibility for climate oversight must be clear. Charters across various committees should specifically enumerate climate risk governance responsibilities. Individual board member expertise in climate-related matters is not only necessary for compliance, but essential for creating the most value from the knowledge this overall governance approach will yield. Boards can include members with relevant climate, sustainability, and risk expertise, and provide ongoing fundamental climate education for all directors. Skills matrices that explicitly include climate competencies are helpful, and nomination processes can prioritize climate expertise where gaps exist. Adding qualified risk directors to the board further helps integrate these many challenges into strategic planning. With ongoing effective education, committee structures, and committee work, boards can demonstrate their prudent care more clearly, and the board as a whole can more reasonably argue that its oversight of climate risk is fit for purpose.
How integrated is climate risk into the Enterprise Risk Management Program? Many organizations have established Enterprise Risk Management (ERM) programs. Adopting the mindset that the company is a portfolio of risk-taking ventures allows us to see the positive value that ERM can bring. Oversight of that ERM program should include validation that climate risk factors into risk identification, assessment, risk capital allocation, and overall mitigation processes. Boards can ensure climate risks are evaluated for their impact on traditional business risks with clear metrics, cost allocations, and monitoring systems. One helpful approach to this includes scenario analysis covering various climate trajectories and their potential impacts on the business. When these impact assessments take a business model mindset, it allows for more effective use of their output. At least one board committee should oversee the evaluation of climate impacts on operations, assets, supply chains, and stakeholder relationships using the 3 areas mentioned at the start of this article. This includes both direct impacts and indirect effects through value chain partners and market changes. Assessments can consider multiple time horizons and the possibility of risk amplification through a lack of trust or fear. Ultimately, this committee work is used to inform strategic planning. When these elements work together in an integrated approach, ERM findings can inform capital allocation decisions, while impact assessments can shape disclosure practices and long-term plans. Board expertise in climate risk governance can enhance strategic oversight, while appropriate committee allocations can ensure comprehensive coverage of issues critical to climate risk governance. Capital allocation decisions will then reflect educated climate considerations. With the knowledge provided by ERM practices and board composition, boards can scrutinize major investments through a climate lens, evaluating both climate risks and opportunities. This includes assessing the climate resilience of these capital projects, considering carbon pricing in investment decisions, and evaluating green investment opportunities. Knowing our stakeholder priorities will also help us estimate the overall cost of these capital decisions. Ultimately, success requires regular review and adaptation of these governance approaches as climate risks, regulations, and stakeholder expectations evolve. Boards benefit by maintaining a dynamic approach and continuously improving their climate oversight capabilities while ensuring integration with their broader ERM model.
Do we think broadly enough about climate risk resiliency? The term resiliency has many meanings. As climate change is a slow-moving but surprisingly impactful element to our lives and the business environment in which we operate, resiliency in the context of climate risk governance means both our ability to withstand surprises and our thoughtfulness on how to thrive amidst nearly certain medium-term change, and our role in contributing to the reversal of any long-term consequential negative changes we expect. Integrating climate risk into the overall corporate strategy is essential if our corporate values include these long-term ideas. This involves setting clear objectives and targets for reducing carbon emissions, enhancing energy efficiency, and adopting sustainable practices, especially those most important to our capital providers. Boards may have a duty to ensure that climate considerations are appropriately included in decision-making processes across all levels of the organization. As warranted, investing in resilient infrastructure and technologies that can withstand climate impacts is an effective approach. This may include upgrading facilities, diversifying supply chains, and adopting innovative solutions to enhance operational resilience. Empowerment and agility within the organization are key to developing ongoing resilience. This includes creating corporate-wide rapid response teams with the authority to make quick, impactful decisions to address emerging problems before they escalate. Distributing authority across the organization brings greater knowledge sharing, ownership, and intelligence to all risk-takers, ensuring swift and effective responses to climate-related risks. As we've already stated, establishing relationships with all capital providers, including investors, regulators, creditors, customers, employees, and communities, is also crucial, as boards recognize that access to capital is essential, and its unavailability is an existential threat. Engaging these stakeholders through consistent communication ensures they are part of the governance processes, contributes to the organization's resilience, and decreases the likelihood of capital flight. CARE mandates boards ensure their organizations regularly test resiliency plans. Our surveys have shown that firms with sound risk governance structures were more satisfied with their resiliency plans during the COVID-19 pandemic, highlighting the importance of preparedness for any unexpected event, even one of global impact. Climate risk resiliency planning is no different. Finally, resiliency is also something that comes from a culture that emphasizes continuous learning, adaptation, and seizing new opportunities. By fostering a culture of continuous learning and openness to new ideas, organizations can stay ahead of emerging risks and develop adaptive strategies that can be quickly implemented in response to climate risks and the opportunities that arise from this continuous examination. And that brings us to our fifth and final checkpoint.
Are we welcoming of climate opportunities? Incorporating climate risk governance into a board's framework presents numerous opportunities that can enhance value by driving innovation, identifying potential acquisition targets, and better anticipating and mitigating potential disruptions. Truncating the loss side of the distribution of possible futures and enhancing the prospective gain side of the distribution of future possibilities. It may be unusual to think that staying ahead of regulatory requirements related to climate change can provide a competitive edge. However, boards that proactively address climate risks can avoid penalties and benefit from incentives for sustainable practices. This helps maintain regulatory compliance and positions the organization as a leader in sustainability. Such foresight can lead to significant advantages in the marketplace, as consumers and partners often prefer companies seen as compliant and forward-thinking. As noted earlier, stakeholder confidence and access to capital in many forms are crucial for any organization. Boards demonstrating robust climate risk governance can attract values-focused investors, potentially leading to better access to capital and favorable financing terms. This can result in a more stable financial foundation and the ability to fund further sustainability initiatives. Companies seen as leaders in climate risk management can enhance their reputation and brand value, increasing customer loyalty and attracting top talent, especially as generational values change. Additionally, partnerships with stakeholders can lead to co-created solutions that address climate challenges more effectively, resulting in shared value and stronger, more resilient communities. Boards can guide their companies to invest in renewable energy sources, reducing carbon footprints and opening up new revenue streams in the growing green energy market. Moreover, boards can use their climate risk insights to drive innovation within their organizations. By encouraging the development of new technologies and sustainable practices, companies can create products and services that meet the increasing demand for eco-friendly solutions. This can lead to the creation of entirely new markets and business models, providing a competitive edge. For example, a company that pioneers in developing biodegradable packaging materials can tap into the rising consumer preference for sustainable products, thereby enhancing its market share and brand reputation. By reducing waste, optimizing resource use, and lowering energy consumption, companies can improve their bottom line while also contributing to environmental conservation. These efficiency gains can be reinvested into further sustainability initiatives, creating a virtuous cycle of continuous improvement and value creation. Finally, boards can guide their companies to capitalize on emerging efficiency and climate markets through strategic acquisitions, focused experimentation, or simply through more creative thinking around strategic plans.
In conclusion, in the end, following this 5-checkpoint approach means that embracing climate risk through board governance priorities is more likely to lead to value creation. In contrast, ignoring or minimizing the climate change grey rhino charging right at us will leave only a less robust entity in the future, or none at all. And that is far from fulfilling our duty of care. In the appendix, we provide nearly 20 questions for your board assessment of where you are today and where you'd like to be. We also provide numerous reference reading materials on the subjects discussed herein. If you've not yet started, begin now. If you're well on your way, check your progress. If you think you've got climate risk handled, never stop asking if you can be better.